I'd like to work again, but I'd never been a guy who would sell his soul to get, money and things.
Everyone was told, from Rupert Murdoch, from Fox, to every studio, look, if you touch this thing, you will be out, you will be done, you'll be finished.
$251 million. No press junkets, no morning show appearances, no late-night segments, no reviews in the major publications. Just silence, deliberate, institutional, coordinated silence around one of the most commercially successful independent films in modern American history. And now the men behind that silence have a new problem. Because two of Hollywood's most dangerous truth-tellers just joined forces. And standing right beside them, watching, calculating, and starting to talk is one of Hollywood's last true survivors. But here's what nobody is connecting. Mark Wahlberg doesn't scare easily. 30 years inside the machine. 3 decades of navigating every trap, every political landmine, every unwritten rule this industry runs on. And right now, Mark Wahlberg is watching Mel Gibson and Jim Caviezel walk towards something that even someone who has survived everything Hollywood has thrown at him is not entirely sure they can come back from. And he's starting to say so out loud. To understand why Hollywood is in full panic mode right now, you have to understand the blueprint. And the blueprint is Jim Caviezel. This is not a man who woke up one morning and decided to become a provocateur. This is a decorated actor measured, deeply spiritual, universally respected within craft circles who made a decision early in his career that would define everything that came after it. He decided he would not let the industry dictate his conscience. And for Hollywood, that decision is unforgivable. Most people trace it back to The Passion of the Christ in 2004. Mel Gibson's film. No major studio would distribute it. The smear campaign began before a single frame had been screened publicly. It was called dangerous, irresponsible, inflammatory, and then it made $612 million on a $30 million budget and became one of the most culturally significant films of the century. Caviezel was the lead. He wore the crown of thorns on screen. He carried the film on his back. And what happened to him after it became a phenomenon? Hollywood stopped calling. Not because he was difficult, not because he was unprofessional, not because there was any credible criticism of his work. He simply stopped getting the calls that an actor of his caliber with that box office record should have been getting automatically. That's not the market speaking. That's something else entirely. And then came Sound of Freedom.
About 4 years ago, we showed the movie. This has been a 5-year deal. And they've done everything they could to stop it, as they did this with Passion of the Christ.
5 years. 5 years between completion and release for a film about childing. A film based on documented real-world events. A film whose central crime, the exploitation of children, is universally condemned across every political, cultural, and ideological line that exists. Ask yourself the obvious question. Why? Why would any institution in any industry want to suppress a film about protecting children from predators? Because the standard Hollywood move, the move they always make, would have been to absorb it, co-opt it, throw award season marketing behind it, wrap themselves in the social justice messaging, and take credit for the conversation. They didn't do that. Instead, they ignored it. Then they tried to discredit it. Then they watched it make $251 million without a single dollar of their promotional machinery.
8-armed octopus. And if you take just tracking out, that arm will grow back. You have to take the head.
That is not promotional language. That is the language of someone describing a system, a structure, something that operates far beyond individual criminal acts and individual bad actors. And the moment Caviezel started taking that language onto major platforms, podcasts, faith networks, political commentary shows the response from Hollywood stopped being passive. It became targeted, and the first casualty wasn't Caviezel himself. It was the man standing next to it, Tim Ballard, former Department of Homeland Security operative, founder of Operation Underground Railroad, the real-world inspiration for the film. A man who didn't theorize about Tron networks, he had dismantled them. He had the receipts, the operational intelligence, the documented evidence of how these networks function at a tactical level. That combination, Caviezel's platform, Ballard's proof, was apparently too dangerous to be allowed to exist at full capacity.
The behavior of Tim Ballard crossed the line, and these women cannot remain silent.
No. July 2023. At the exact moment Sound of Freedom was dominating the box office. Multiple misconduct allegations. An independent law firm deployed. A swift conclusion reached. And then years later, prosecutors quietly declined to file any charges. Insufficient evidence. No trial, no day in court, just the destruction of a reputation during the precise window of maximum cultural impact. The goal was never a conviction. It was a shutdown. Now, here is where this story takes a turn that most people haven't fully processed. Mark Wahlberg has been watching all of this, and Mark Wahlberg is not Jim Caviezel. He is not a firebrand. He doesn't go on podcasts and talk about elite networks and blackmail operations. He is, by Hollywood standards, a survivor, someone who came up through one of the most brutal gauntlets in this industry, rebuilt his image from the ground up, and has maintained his position at the top of the food chain for 30 years. That's not luck. That's someone who understands the rules of the game at a fundamental level. So when Mark Wahlberg calls Hollywood a monster, not metaphorically, not in a joke, but as a direct statement of belief from someone who has spent 3 decades inside that monster, that is not a throwaway line. That is a man who has seen things and who has reached a point where he's willing to say so. Wahlberg is one of the very few people in Hollywood who has both the credibility and the commercial clout to make statements like that without being immediately blacklisted. He's too big to be quietly disappeared. He's too publicly faithful, and he's too deeply connected to the orbit of Sound of Freedom to pretend he doesn't see what's happening.
Means so much to you. Have you always talked about it? Or did you feel at some point like, okay, I have a platform here and I just want to share this part of my journey?
I have. It's a balance. I don't want to jam it down anybody's throat, but I do not.
In 2024, Hollywood, where openly Christian public figures are systematically marginalized, where studios greenlight anti-religious content at an industrial scale while treating sincere expressions of Christianity as a PR liability. That statement is not small. That is a declaration. And now Wahlberg is doing something that has the industry deeply rattled. He's pairing up with Mel Gibson again. Let's talk about Mel Gibson because his story is the original template. Before Caviezel, before Ballard, before Sound of Freedom, there was Gibson. Gibson made the passion of the Christ against the explicit advice of virtually everyone in Hollywood. The smear campaign started before the film finished production. No major studio would touch it. And then it made $612 million and became a cultural earthquake. What happened to Gibson afterward? Hollywood made sure the world knew about every personal failing, every mistake, every moment of weakness, amplified, repeated, weaponized. A 2006 traffic stop in Malibu became the perfect instrument of public destruction. His career was torched. He retreated to Australia.
All these horror stories there that you think, boy, it seems as if I'm being sacrificed over here. No, that couldn't be true. And then you realize that it is true.
He felt like he was being sacrificed. And when you look at what has emerged since then, the Epstein files, the Diddy case, the Weinstein convictions, the documented pattern of institutional protection for the most powerful predators in entertainment, it becomes very difficult to argue he was wrong. But here's what nobody talks about. Gibson never stopped working. He kept directing. He kept producing. He made Hacksaw Ridge, which earned him an Academy Award nomination and made the establishment extremely uncomfortable because they couldn't dismiss it. And now, in 2026, he is circling back, pairing with Wahlberg on Flight Risk. And, according to everything that's been circulating, preparing something far bigger alongside Jim Caviezel.
I remember this one conversation I had with Mel Gibson and the whole team that came in and just said, wow, these are the stakes.
They walked in knowing the stakes, fully aware, eyes open. A Gibson-Wahlberg collaboration isn't just a movie at this specific moment in time with the Epstein documents in circulation with Sound of Freedom's cultural aftershock still reverberating with Caviezel's words still living rent-free in the public consciousness. A Gibson-Wahlberg collaboration is a statement. Two men who have survived Hollywood's attempts to sideline them, choosing to work together, refusing to pretend the last several years didn't happen. And then there's Keanu Reeves. Here's what most people don't fully appreciate about Keanu Reeves. He has never needed Hollywood's approval. When Fox Studios blacklisted him for nearly a decade after he refused to do Speed 2, his response wasn't a grovel, wasn't to apologize, wasn't to take the first terrible project they offered to let him back in the door. He waited. He did what felt right. He made the movies he believed in. And then with The Matrix, he came back bigger than ever on his own terms. 10 years of blacklisting for refusing to make a sequel he didn't believe in. And Keanu survived it not by playing the game, but by refusing to. That kind of institutional independence makes the Hollywood power structure genuinely nervous. Because here's the rule the machine operates by. Everyone has a price. Everyone has a vulnerability. Everyone can be bought, threatened, embarrassed, or destroyed. That's the assumption the machine runs on. Keanu Reeves has consistently and repeatedly across 3 decades proven that assumption wrong. He gave away portions of his Matrix earnings so the special effects team could receive bonuses. He took pay cuts so other cast members could be paid more. He rides the subway. He sits on park benches. None of this is performative. It's who he is. And in an industry that runs on leverage, on knowing what people want, what they fear, what they'll do to protect their position. A man who genuinely doesn't care about the trappings of fame is essentially leverage proof. Not heroic, not admirable in the Hollywood sense. Dangerous. And now Keanu is speaking out about something specific. Something that sounds on the surface like a simple labor dispute, but isn't his opposition to deepfake technology and unauthorized CGI manipulation in Hollywood. A tear he never shed. His face, his body, his performance manipulated into something he never did, never felt, never chose to express. He has publicly declared he will not accept that, will not sign away the rights to his own emotional truth in perpetuity. Scale that up. If a studio can add a single tear to Keanu Reeves' face without his knowledge or consent, what else can that technology manufacture? What false confessions? What fabricated statements? What evidence constructed entirely out of nothing? This is not hypothetical. This is the logical endpoint of a technology that is already in use, and one of Hollywood's most trusted and beloved figures is publicly standing in the way of it. That's not an actor protecting his brand. That's someone throwing a wrench into a machine that depends on those tools to maintain its grip on reality itself. And here is where everything we have been discussing converges. Caviezel, Wahlberg, Gibson, Reeves, Sound of Freedom, deep fakes, the systematic silencing of truth-tellers. It all converges on one name, Jeffrey Epstein.
Third time talking in this one particular spot. And I'm thinking, what, did we do something wrong or something? But so then one more time it happened. At the end, I was asking about the movie, and I asked him about that one particular part where everybody's talking, and they all cried out Epstein Island. And I went, oh, okay. Now I understand what we're up against.
We're not a journalist, not a political commentator, not a conspiracy theorist online. A regular audience had a screening of Sound of Freedom spontaneously, organically, repeatedly calling out the name of the most infamous alleged child tracker in modern American history because the audience already knew. The public had already sensed the connection. The film wasn't telling people something new. It was giving people permission to say out loud what they had already been feeling for years. In 2026, the Department of Justice moved forward with mandatory disclosure involving millions of pages of files tied to Epstein's activities, court records, communications, investigative notes, an enormous archive that had been sealed or partially obscured for years. Attorney General Pam Bondi submitted over 300 names to Congress. Politicians, billionaires, celebrities, all connected to a man who ran what investigators have described as one of the most sophisticated criminal networks in modern history.
Epstein Island isn't the only island out there.
Let that land. The man who made the highest-grossing independent film about childing in American history, who worked directly alongside real-world operatives who had spent years documenting how these networks function, is telling you plainly on camera that Epstein was not an isolated case, that the island was not unique, that the structure that created and sustained Epstein's operation is still intact.
It's disgusting that the media hasn't covered it like they...
Why wouldn't the media cover it? The same media companies that own the entertainment studios. The same conglomerates that control what gets made, what gets distributed, what gets reviewed, and what gets ignored. The same institutions that looked at a $251 million box office result and collectively decided the professional thing to do was pretend it didn't exist. And now Mel Gibson and Jim Caviezel are making a new movie. And this time it is not about Colombian cartels and Haitian networks. This time, according to everything circulating right now, it is about Epstein's Island itself. Not broadly, not gesturing at powerful elites in the abstract, specific people, specific events, names that appear in documents that have already been made public, flight manifests that are already in federal files, congressional submissions that are already on the record, Sound of Freedom cut off one arm of the octopus. The new movie is going for the head.
That's the biggest problem for children in this industry.
The casting couch even applies to children.
Oh yeah, not in the same way. It's all done under the radar.
Nobody talks about pedophilia.
It's the big secret.
And it's widespread?
Oh yeah. I was surrounded by them when I was 14 years old. Surrounded, literally. Didn't even know it.
Corey Feldman has been saying this for over 20 years. Cat Williams predicted in early 2024 that the truth was about to come flooding out. Corey Hays' story, the quiet onset documentary, the Diddy case, the Weinstein convictions, the Epstein files. Every single piece of this has been building toward this moment. And Hollywood, for all its power, for all its resources, for all its ability to manufacture reality for global audiences, cannot stop what is already in motion because the landscape has fundamentally changed. The Angel Studios model proved it. Crowd-funded, independently distributed, $200 million at the box office without a single studio gate to pass through.
Could lose our republic. Are we going to let our children go?
The old playbook doesn't work anymore. Mark Wahlberg has spent 30 years inside this machine. He knows exactly what it costs to speak. He knows exactly what the machine does to people who step out of line. He has watched it happen in real time to Gibson, to Caviezel, to Ballard, to Feldman, to every person who has ever gotten too close to the truth this industry is protecting. And he's still talking. That tells you something because people like Mark Wahlberg do not take risks they cannot survive. They calculate, they weigh, they measure the moment against the cost. And right now in 2026, with 300 names in congressional files and millions of pages of Epstein documents circulating across the internet, Wahlberg has apparently made a calculation. The storm Caviezel has been predicting for years. It's here. And the most powerful people in Hollywood, the ones whose names appear in those files, the ones who made those calls to studios and said, "Touch this and you're finished." Those people are watching two men with a camera and a distribution network that doesn't need their permission walk toward them. The machine is loud, but it's never faced this before.